Namaskar. Welcome once again to this episode of the weekly dialogues in Jaipur Dialogues, and I have with me Mr. Nilesh Oak. We introduced we introduced him in one of the earlier episodes, and you know that he's written some great stuff on the Indic chronology, on the Mahabharat war, on the Valmiki Ramayana, as also on Bhishma Nirvan, is now working out the chronology of the Vedas, and in particular the Rig Vedas. How are you, Nilesh ji?
Namaskar, Sanjay ji. Doing well in social distancing and being safe.
I think this social distancing is going to stay for pretty long because as far as I know, all conferences have been postponed and everything is on social distancing. And even Jaipur Dialogues this year may have to be on this social distancing mode.
And America and Europe is going into Namaste and Namaskar.
All old Indian traditions. And old Indian traditions are important. And this talk also, this time, again, we are going to hold only on the Indian traditions, one of the major Indian traditions of epistemology. For our audience, epistemology is proof system of proofs. How to obtain knowledge by theories, and when you have the theories, then you have to devise the system of proof, how to prove those theories. So in Indian darshanas, this shabda darshana system has also the three, what is called the Nastika darshan. So they are not exactly Nastik as in atheism, because atheism itself is a binary, and none of the Indian darshanas have ever been a binary, not even Charvaka for that matter. Even that had some elements of the ternary logic. So, Nilesh ji, let me put it this way. And the framework, as we devised in the last discussion on the logic, I think it's very convenient to have the framework of the religions / dharma. And we've discussed that when you have a binary logic, then the system of proof also is actually one valued, and that value is simply the scripture. So binary logic necessarily has only one proof, and that proof is the scripture. Beyond that, there is nothing, because everything else is false. Whereas in the Indian system, we got 6 kind of different proofs. We have the pratyaksha pramana, then we have the what is called the deductive logic, the pratyaksha, the anumana, the anumana, the upamana. Then you have what is called the arthaprapti. Arthaprapti is deduction, though sometimes people mix up both anuman and arthaprapti. And then you have what is called anupalabdhi, denial or non-existence. And finally, you have what is called agam, or the shabda pramana. Is it so that the hierarchy is also like this, that pratyaksha pramana has the highest value in the Indian systems, and the agama or the shabda pramana has the lowest value among all the 6? Can we put it in that hierarchy also?
Okay, no, great question. I would give a binary answer to that for fun. Okay, it's yes and no. Okay, but
yes and no is not a binary answer.
No, I know it's not. Actually, it's a one answer, single answer. Well, but let's talk something in defense of binary just to begin with. For example, if you and me get together and we have to go to a restaurant in the evening, and you may ask me what you feel like having. The Jaipur has so many variations, and I suggest something. It won't be Chinese anymore. But say if I suggest something, some particular cuisine, And then we decide between, say, two restaurants, and we decide to go to one. To that extent, for that practical purposes, binary is perfectly fine. You know, which city you want to go, whether you have two jobs and you want to decide which one job you want to take. You know, in that sense, you have to make that binary decision. That's understandable. So it has a value, not to take that away. Just like true and false, you know, some certain things we can say either that's a true or false, or a better approximation to the truth. But now to your question. So we start with a pratyaksha and we all the way go to the shabda and shabda or agama. And is the hierarchy is like that? Well, if you take Shad Darshanas, and now you mention, and I'm glad you mentioned. So, for example, the Buddhist Darshana, or Jaina Darshana, or Charvaka Darshana, or other Darshanas, and glad you mentioned it. Like again, that's not a binary, as you very clearly said. It's not atheist versus non-atheist Darshanas.
No, it is not. It is not. No. Gnostic is very wrongly translated as atheism.
Absolutely. In fact, in the case of Darshanas, the Nastik and Astik simply means the Astik Darshanas accept the authority of the Vedas. Right. And Nastik Darshanas do not accept the authority of the Vedas. Now, both Darshanas have no problem with the Vedic knowledge, but whether they take that as the authority, that is the point. Okay. Also, many people confuse that Astik Nastik because of this whole confusion with a believing in God versus not believing in God. Even that's not true. For example, if you go to Purva Mimamsa, you know, it's again not Nastik. I mean, we call it Astik Darshana, but it says for its elaboration, it doesn't need an assumption of a God. It's not against God. It's not for God. It says it doesn't need that assumption. Interestingly, the more
even in
go ahead.
I know a lot of people who treat Uttar Mimamsa as a Nastik darshan in that sense.
Very true.
It does accept the authority of the Vedas, but if you liken it to the God systems of the Abrahamic faiths, it doesn't need the God at all. In fact, it's questioning God all the time.
Correct.
Upanishads and the Uttar Mimamsa is all about questions, everything.
Correct. To the extent, you may know this, that Shankaracharya, when he elaborated his philosophy, you know, the Keval Advaita, or whatever the name you want to give it, he was questioned by many within the Indian tradition itself as someone who is an atheist.
Right.
One of the term used for him was a Prachanna Buddha. You know, the Buddha, like in sense of atheism coming in the guise. So you're right. You're right. So but back to pratyaksha versus the anumana, what you call the agama, shabda and agama. Again, see, remember that multi-logic system. The simple answer, which is not people don't necessarily like it, but the answer is it depends. It depends on the context.
And exactly, context is very important in the Indian system. It's all about context.
Yes.
So, coming to the pratyaksha pramana, now we've seen this, and I think there will be a lot of discussions, and there's some discussions which are so obvious and so clearly articulated in some scriptures. In Mahabharata, we remember we have that famous discussions between Raja Janak and one of the sages, in which this discussion comes up. You yourself referred to it, and I took it from you, and I used it in one of the articles that I penned. And that was on parampara. So if we take the Indic reference, so in the Indic reference, the parampara is greatly emphasized in the later Vedic period, or rather we should say in the post-Vedic period. Post-Vedic period is one in which I think the Shabda Pramana has gained ascendancy. And a lot of people simply, in fact, I remember that great debate that you've been having on dating of Mahabharat war. Even in that, Shabda Pramana counts a lot for your opponents. That is, you insist on the Pratyaksha Pramana. So what are the aspects of this Pratyaksha Pramana? And I think the pratyaksha pramana is supported even in the agamas, even in the shastras.
Absolutely. For example, pratyaksha praman is, take shad darshanas. It is a prominent praman for all shad darshanas, period. Okay, so that's number one. Then no matter which shastra you are discussing, whether it's a ganita or astronomy, ayurveda, so it will use that logic system, but the pratyaksha praman is the highest praman. So one thing that epistemologically the Indians did very well, and I'm going to not quote the words, but I will quote just the words and translation from Sankhya Karika, which is a commentary on Sankhya philosophy of Kapila. But Sankhya Karika has 72 verses, beautifully written by Ishwara Krishna. And of course, then there are commentaries by Vachaspati Mishra and whatnot. But this is very, I mean, I find it fascinating. What the limits are given. For example, the whole approach is to explore the world outside world, but also the inside world, the inner world, and find the truth, right? Or get closer to the truth. It recognizes the limitations. The epistemology has this very important element of what are the limits of our knowledge. And those limits are not fixed, right? The limits can change with time. But I'll just quote like 8 words that it uses in one verse, So for example, it says some of the things that we will not know, or we will not know it properly. And why is that? We may think it's a common sense, but that's what people fight. Science versus, can you prove this scientifically and whatnot? It says ati durat, samipyat, indriya ghata, atmano anavasthanat, Saukshmad, Vyavadhanat, Abhibhavat, and Samana Bhiyara. Just a quick translation, like something that's too far away. Ati Durat, like the stars, By the time you see the light of the star and study it, it may be thousands and thousands of years old, what you are studying. So at night when we see the star, it is like what we see is how it was thousands of years ago. That's how it long for the light to come in. So we are studying it now, but we are studying the past in that sense. Samipya, something is so close, that's how we have to use certain glasses, right? Long vision, short vision, we need that. Indriya ghat, there's the sensory impairment. That's why the sensory impairment, the very nice, funny example I'll give you is this. Suppose you have this, somebody listens to this discussion, or a group of people listen to this discussion. Some people are totally fascinated by what they hear, whereas others are totally dumbfounded. Now, it is the same discussion you and me had, right? That has to do with that intellect, right? The Indriya Ghat, the limitations, the instability of a mind, okay, the subtlety and the obscuration and similarity with something else. The reason I mentioned that is once you start with that idea, then you are, ready to explore anything. So back to those 6 pramanas that you mentioned. And by the way, those 6 pramanas can even also further classified into sub-classification, like, the probability and propensity and whatnot. What you will find, and you quoted that verse, or actually I will ask you, Sanjay ji, to quote that verse, that from Mahabharata. And what happens there is, what that particular verse says. So I'll give you the translation. You quote some portion of it if you remember.
Pratyakshena vinna kritante va na kinchana.
Right.
And that is the right later part of that verse. That's what matters.
Correct. And then the krutanta, and people will immediately jump into our yoga. We have our own dogmas too. They might go into yoga. That krutanta there has nothing to do with yoga. It has to do with
anuman, basically.
Yes.
What it says is that if anuman and shabda are contrary to pratyaksha praman, then they have to be discounted.
Correct.
So they cannot prevail in the absence of a corroboration by pratyaksha.
Correct. So yes, pratyaksha is always the number 1 praman in terms of hierarchy and its importance.
Right.
And so somebody will ask, so what about the shabda? And that is, by the way, we as a civilization, at least of last, I don't know how many 100 years, 200, 300 years, we must take the blame. Okay, putting so much emphasis on the shabda. In fact, you mentioned that post Rigveda, post Mahabharata, possibly the emphasis on the shabda went up. One of the reason, and this is speculation, one of the reason could be lot of knowledge was lost. And when that happens, what do we do? I mean, you try to, like after a terrorist attack or something, just try to collect the pieces that survive and try to put together the picture. It's something of that effect. This could be natural disasters, whatever it was, but it happened. The Mahabharata war itself was a human disaster, in terms of
it was. I think the human population went down by something like 20-25%, something like that.
And we find the genetic marks of the Mahabharata war into modern genetics data now.
Right.
This is published. Yeah, this is published by papers who have no clue about Mahabharata. But it proves it gives a wonderful support for Mahabharata. But back to pratyaksha. So, for example, if somebody says, "Oh, but that was used using anuman," or that was based on a shabda, that was based on a arthaprapti, or anupalabdhi, and the point that all our narratives make, Mahabharata or these Shaddarshanas, it says even when we are talking of a shabda, somebody's experience, it is somebody's experience, meaning it may come to you as somebody's word, authoritative word, but it is someone else pratyaksha. In fact, the verse that you quoted, that verse is essentially saying that it is no matter what pramana you are using, it was pratyaksha for somebody. That much importance is placed on the pratyaksha.
Right. I think even Shankaracharya, whose shabda carries a lot of weight, even he's discouraged this. I think you mentioned this quite often. There is some Shankaracharya verse that you keep mentioning.
Yes,
so
yes.
In fact, and also the Patanjali Sutras.
Oh, very good, very good. So let's start with the Shankaracharya, for example, like right into his commentary on a Brahma Sutra, right at the beginning portion. You will hear this, which is, he said Jnanam, and then many people say slight in a modified format because it comes in the commentary, and then there is a Vartika and people's sub commentaries. But Shankaracharya said Jnanam na purusha tantram kintu vastu tantram. So, for example, how do we get the knowledge? Okay, it says it does not depend.
Vastu here means objectivity.
Vastu meaning objectivity and empirical. The physically how you see it. Jnanam na vastu tantra. Jnanam na what you call purusha tantram kintu vastu tantram. So yeah, a very objective and empirical. Now think of the the fighting that happens between religion and science and why it is not there in the Indian context. For example, Shankaracharya has also said a statement of the effect that if somebody tells you that the fire, is cool and it doesn't burn, even if Agama tells you that, even if a Vedas tell you that, Veda doesn't tell that. But if Veda even says that, because our experience tells you otherwise, we cannot accept that word of the Veda if it says that the fire is hot. Sorry, fire is not hot. What does that mean is saying for ordinary things, for experiential things, like, with our 5 senses, even the limited senses, Ved does not want to get into it, nor it has any conflict with it. That you do with a Vastu Tantram, with your practical knowledge. The things that cannot be accessed with our limited senses, that's when that top-down approach comes. That's what that Shabda becomes important and Agama becomes important. Now, it is important in the sense of it is somebody's pratyaksha. But I talked about the limitations of our intellect.
I think you are making a distinction between the empirical and the experiential now. And the experiential is one that because with our empirical senses and with our intellect, we can definitely do our empirical observations. But then for the higher consciousness, that is something that para-vidya, which does not exist in the Western literature or even the Western science, that matter. For para-vidya, the connotations and the implications are somewhat different. I think this is what you're trying to say.
Yes, and so for example, if the science and technology, let's say, if it can catch up with what has been achieved by in the Indian Yoga Shastra, for example, okay, then there will be no difference between empirical and pratyaksha. Right now, the gap between the what we call empirical, which is pratyaksha in some sense, but the gap between the empirical
let's say pratyaksha of the 5 senses and pratyaksha of the consciousness.
Good one. That's your original contribution, Sanjay ji.
Thank you.
Pratyaksha of a 5 senses and pratyaksha of a, what did you say? Consciousness.
Consciousness.
Correct. And so now the science and technology has to catch up to bring to the pratyaksha of a consciousness. And we are not saying this in a putting science technology down. No, I mean, I'm very fascinated by science and technology. The way we are communicating right now, it is because of science and technology. And that's
science and technology, pratyaksha pramana, the greatest contribution of the Indian system is, I think, it's the only system in the spiritual realm that allows falsification. And falsification after Karl Popper is probably the first principle of science.
Yes.
Leaving the universalization, verification, and repetition behind. Falsification, according to me, is the first principle of science.
Absolutely. And see that. So now, what is that in our system? Can you think of a word for that falsification? Like, that is the best way to make improvement in science, improvement in the growth of knowledge, our knowledge. You know what is the term that Yajnavalkya used and Shankaracharya used? Neti.
Neti. Yes.
Yeah. So that is
neti. Not this. Yes.
Not this, because that makes a quantum jump in our understanding.
Right.
Yeah. So, for example, if you take a Nyaya Darshana view of a pratyaksha, and what is the connection between from a pratyaksha to agama, right? It's, because it's a bottoms up. Nyaya Darshana is a bottoms up, from a hard reality to the theorizing. It starts with a shabda. So if you take my Mahabharata example, right? So shabda of a Vyasa, it says Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishtha at the time of Mahabharata war.
Right.
Yeah, and going back to the Chatushkoti logic, to somebody it says, okay, Mahabharata mein likha hai na, if it is in the Mahabharata, it's good enough for me. So that's fine too. It could be true or false, but it's in the Mahabharata. On a Shraddha, I'm going to take it. The other person, someone in the Samshaya category, there, neither true nor false, he says, I don't even accept Mahabharata. Now they don't understand empirical, they don't understand science, But if you study it, you by luck with the science technology, you may be able to make it empirically, objectively testable, and that's what happened, right? But it starts with the shabda. From that, you get the shabda bodha, So you try to make connection with what you know, and then it has to go through the upaman and anuman, and it has to come to the pratyaksha with your senses. Like objectively verified. So if I claim something, you should be able to see the same thing if you look at the sky, or if you look at a simulation, or if you mathematically calculate. So there is no contradiction also. There is no conflict between these different pramanas. In fact, I'll quickly quote, is in Bhagavad Puran, this is Krishna saying to Uddhava, So he says, Shruti pratyaksham aitiyam anumanam chatushtayam pramaneshu anavasthanad vikalpatsa virajyate. For example, science is going for most part, you can say, the prominent ones is pratyaksha anumana, like in the empirical sense.
Right.
Bhagavad Puran is saying even that's not sufficient. Now, just think of this beauty. He says, okay, so pratyaksha anumana fine, but he says, Shruti pratyaksham aitiyam. The aitiya in the itihas, in the sense of experience.
Yes. In the sense of experience, or agam, actually. It is also used for agam.
Right. Or Shruti, sometimes you see the word as a smruti in the Taittiriya Brahmana instead of Bhagavad Puran. If you go, instead of Shruti Pratyaksham, it says Smruti Pratyaksham. So, these people, our traditions used it in a very interchangeable way. They were not stuck into that binary logic, Shruti, and now you cannot say Smruti. But the simple point is, you have to go even beyond the triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing. You are demanded to have these what we call apta pramana, then in inner pramana, antakarana pramana, and so the what you call the verification system was even more robust than what we see in modern science right now.
It was not possible for anybody to just say that I have done some kind of antaranga pramana. Bahiranga pramana anybody can verify with the 5 senses, but antaranga pramana, you had a very, very rigorous system where gurus had to verify. Those who could go to that kind of a spiritual experience,
yes,
they would be the ones who could verify. So that was indeed a very rigorous system. It wasn't easy for anyone to just kind of fib anybody. That was not possible. Now, you also mentioned, I've heard you mention the Patanjali Sutra on the objectivity part of it.
Right. See how beautiful. You have seen my Chatushkoti logic slide, and you have used it in one of your articles also very well.
Right.
And so, for example, think of that quadrants. If you can visualize those 4 quadrants there.
Yes.
So the top right-hand corner is the corner where we look at all the evidence and we find everything to make it testable. Now that is the method Patanjali is saying in his Yoga Sutra, the first portion, Samadhipad. So for example, if you go to the Sutra number 7, he says, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama, Pramanani. See, this is the triangulation of these is how you get to the truth, how you get the true knowledge.
Out of the 6, he's using only 3.
Well, he is using 3. What you will find, Sanjay ji, is, so now he uses 3. Sage Gotama in Nyaya uses 4. But what really happens is all of them are actually using all 6. Okay. What happens is the emphasis is different, number 1. And second, they combine few into one of these 3 or one of these 4. Okay. So if you go into the commentary, you will find, and there is a priority, like a hierarchy in the sense of, for example, Nyaya Darshana being a very hard realist, they will go for arthaprapti or anupalabdhi as the last resort. And what they say is, even if you use arthaprapti or anupalabdhi, your conclusions are only tentative in nature, meaning you can use that knowledge until finally you have a chance to verify it. I mean, in a pratyaksha way.
Yes.
But otherwise, they all use 6. But so pratyaksha, anumana, agama, pramanani is how we get to the truth. So if you look at the Chatushkoti logic, see how beautiful it is. So the top right-hand corner, how we get to the truth is pratyaksha, anumana, agama, pramanani, the triangulation of these 3, or these 6 pramana, you can say. The next one below the right-hand corner, which is a mithya jnana corner, okay? I call them superficial manipulators, and they can be found everywhere. Is that the next sutra of Patanjali says, Viparyayo mithya jnanam atadrupa pratishtham. Viparyayo in context of the first one. If you don't follow this official method, meaning correct method, it will lead you to the false knowledge. Mithya jnanam. Atadrupa pratishtham. And the third one is also very important. Huh? If you go to the bottom third quadrant, which is I call it tamasic skeptics.
संशय.
हाँ, उनको कुछ करना नहीं है, किसी को करने देना नहीं है. They don't want to accept anything, and a lot of people fall into that one. Okay, so samshayana vastu shunya. Remember in Shankaracharya's we talked about the vastu. Here, the third sutra of Patanjali, number 9, it says vastu shunyo vikalpa, shabda jnananupati, vastu shunyo vikalpa. All you have is a verbal claim, a conjecture, a guess, presumption, assumption, and therefore actually there are very unfortunate, but there are many researchers who assume something, who presume something, and they immediately think therefore it is true.
Yes, it happens. It happens very often, and it has. I think we keep coming across these kind of situations quite often.
Yeah. So the last one is that shabda jnananupati vikalpa. Yeah. And that means that will lead to what? Vikalpa, confusion and delusion. Confusion and delusion of those people who use it, and also unfortunately to those who communicate, to whom they communicate this information.
That's quite right. I've seen this practically happening. And I've seen this. In fact, I wrote that article I was mentioning again and again. That was in reference to the Varna system. Because all the pratyaksha and even the earlier agam, everything attests to Varna being a very, very flexible kind of a system. But a lot of our, what is called Shastris, they have made it into some kind of a parampara, and parampara is something that you cannot touch. Correct. And that's what I actually brought out in that article, and somebody was arguing, and I sent that article to him, and he never contested it. All he said that you are not authorized. It is exactly like, they do that. In Islam, there is a concept called taqleed. Taqleed means that use of aql or use of reason is prohibited for all the people except the few authorized ones. So that they are able to enforce their domination, they're able to enforce their will, and they're able to take the community in the direction that they want. So I said that this is the taqleed of the Sanatan Dharmis. That is when they keep emphasizing on parampara.
Right.
So I think that is how it works.
Yeah. I'll make quick couple points, which is to say, anytime a great acharya, he writes a commentary. So take Bhagavad Gita for example, so many commentaries, right? Shankaracharya wrote on it, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, so many others. Anytime they're writing a commentary, in some fashion, they are questioning the parampara. Now, questioning not in a negative sense, the questioning in the sense of taking it to the next level of growth of knowledge.
Exactly. The evolution from Newton to Einstein, as it is said.
And the quick second point I will mention, which I think we need to keep that in mind, and the huge difference between the Shad Darshana and or even Charvaka also fall into that. I mean, we are Buddhism, Jainism, they are also this. The common thread for all these, let's call Shad plus 3 plus whatever number of Indian Darshanas, let's call it Indian Darshanas. The common thread is that they need to meet certain qualifications to practice these Darshanas, and whether Astika, Nastika, whether they are Ishwaravadi, Nirishwaravadi, all of them are interested in truly knowing the truth. They are not after creating some agenda. They are not after creating some dogma. I mean, that is the point that is missed and lost many times.
That's right. Thank you very much, Nileshji. Once again, a very enlightening session. And I'm sure that our viewers must have learned a lot from this discussion. And now what we'll do is that in future sessions, we will apply the logic and the epistemology that we've learned in these two sessions to practical situations.
Very good. Thank you, Sanjay ji, and look forward to those future sessions.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.